Welcome to English with Zenko Master. Get ready to learn something new today.
The first gift arrived on a Sunday morning. I was folding laundry in the kitchen when I heard the sound. It wasn't a knock or a bell. It was more like a soft hum, almost like wind singing through a crack in the door. I walked to the front entrance and opened it without thinking. On the ground sat a small wooden box, tied with a thin gold ribbon. There was no note, no name, nothing but silence outside. I looked down the street, but no one was there. Inside the box was a key. It was silver, cool to the touch, and didn't belong to anything I owned. I placed it on the counter and stared at it for several minutes. I didn't understand why I felt nervous. It was only a key. But something about the box, the ribbon, and the strange silence outside made me uneasy. That evening, I found out what the key opened. I had lost the spare key to my apartment a few months before. I had searched everywhere, even inside my winter coat pockets and the drawer of loose batteries. But that night, when I reached into that same drawer to get a pen, the silver key was gone from the kitchen counter and already there in my hand. I didn't put it there. I was sure of that. It fit perfectly into my front door. Not like the old key. This one turned with ease, soft and smooth, like it had always belonged there. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I had found it earlier and placed it inside without noticing. My brain made up small lies like that for comfort, but the feeling inside me didn't believe those lies. 3 days later, the second gift arrived. This time, it came in the middle of the night. I woke up to a sound. Not loud, not frightening. More like a soft movement, the way curtains shift in a breeze. I went to the kitchen and found another wooden box on the table. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't seen any open windows. Inside the second box was a ring. It was simple. Gold, with a tiny red stone in the center. It looked old, but clean, like it had been protected for many years. I slid it on my finger without knowing why. It fit perfectly. The next morning, something strange happened at work. I was late to the meeting. Normally, my boss would say something. He was always strict about time, always checking his watch. But when I walked into the room, he smiled at me. That was already unusual. Then, for the next 30 minutes, he didn't look at anyone but me. Every time he asked a question, it was directed toward me. When I spoke, he nodded as if my words were the most important in the room. I didn't understand why. I hadn't said anything special. I was speaking like I always did. But his attention was focused, warm, almost like admiration. Later that day, I remembered the ring. I looked at it under the office light. The red stone had grown brighter somehow, as if it had been lit from within. That night, I sat on the floor of my small living room and thought about the gifts. The key, the ring. They weren't just objects. They were changing things around me, making things smoother, easier. But why? And from who? The third gift came during a rainstorm. I had come home soaked, my clothes sticking to my skin, my hair dripping cold water down my back. I found the box on my pillow. This time, it was larger, heavier, and made of dark wood. I opened it slowly, almost afraid now. Inside was a watch. It wasn't digital or modern. It had small hands and a delicate face, with tiny numbers in faded gold. I put it on because I didn't know what else to do. That week, time started changing for me. I would look at the clock and hours had passed, but I didn't feel them. Or the opposite. I would finish hours of work and look up to see that only 20 minutes had gone by. I wasn't tired. I wasn't confused. But something about the way time moved felt different. My coworkers started noticing. "You always finish everything so fast," one of them said. Another joked, "You've got a time machine or something?" I laughed along with them, but inside, I didn't feel like laughing. I started to watch the world differently. People moved at their normal pace. Traffic was the same. But I began noticing details I had never seen before. The exact number of steps it took me to get from my car to the front door. The way the elevator always paused slightly between the third and fourth floor. I began to see patterns in everything. The gifts were helping me. That was clear now, but I wasn't sure they were helping in a good way. I had stopped asking who was sending them. A part of me didn't want to know, but deep down, another part did. One night, I dreamed of a woman sitting in a forest. She was not young, not old. Her face was calm, her hands folded in her lap. She was surrounded by birds, trees, and tiny lights that moved like fireflies. She said nothing. She only looked at me. When I woke up, I had tears on my cheeks. I didn't know why I was crying. The fourth gift came on a Monday, right after I received bad news. My aunt had passed away, the only family member I spoke to regularly. She had been sick for some time, but I still felt the shock of loss. I sat alone on my couch that evening, not wanting to eat, not wanting to move. That was when I saw the fourth box. It hadn't been there before. It sat next to my cup of cold tea, quiet and waiting. This time, I didn't want to open it. I was afraid of what might come next, but my hands moved anyway. Inside was a small mirror, plain, with a silver frame and no decorations. I looked into it and saw myself, but different. My face was peaceful. My eyes looked stronger. For a second, I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel empty. That mirror stayed on my table from that day on. Every time I looked into it, I felt like someone else was looking back. Someone kinder. Someone wiser. Over the next few weeks, life became smoother. People treated me better. Work became easier. My thoughts became clearer. But nothing came for free. I started to feel a distance grow between me and others. I smiled more, but I meant it less. I listened more, but I cared less. The world felt lighter, but also quieter, colder. I had stopped getting calls from friends. I told myself they were busy, but deep down, I knew I was the one becoming unreachable. Then, one night, I saw something I hadn't expected. I came home and found not one, but 2 boxes sitting on my floor. And I knew then that something had changed. Before I share the rest of my story, could you please tell me where you're from? It gives me strength to know there's someone out there who listens to me, who understands me. It means a lot to me. The 2 boxes were not the same size. One was small, like the first few had been. The other was long and narrow, like a box made for a pen or a knife. I stood in the doorway, holding my breath. The air felt heavier. The soft humming sound I had heard during the first delivery was gone. Now there was only silence, and it didn't feel peaceful. I opened the small box first. Inside was a comb made of black wood. It felt smooth and old, but strong in my hand. When I ran it through my hair, I felt a sudden wave of calm, like a soft breeze moving through my thoughts. It was as if all my worries disappeared for a moment. My shoulders relaxed. My breathing slowed. I sat down on the couch and closed my eyes, still holding the comb. But when I opened the second box, the feeling changed. Inside was a letter opener. Or at least, that's what it looked like. It had a short silver blade, not sharp enough to cut skin, but strong enough to open envelopes or packages. The handle was cold and shaped like an eye. A small stone in the center seemed to watch me. I didn't understand this gift. It didn't seem useful, but I didn't throw it away. I placed it beside the mirror on my table and stared at both objects for a long time. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept turning from one side to the other. I kept thinking about the 2 boxes and what they meant. In the morning, something strange happened. I saw a woman in the elevator I had never seen before. She was tall and thin, with dark hair and clothes that looked old-fashioned. She stood very still and didn't press any buttons. I was already inside when she stepped in. We didn't speak, but when she looked at me, I felt cold. Her eyes were the same color as the stone on the letter opener. I got out on my floor and didn't look back. But something told me she stayed in the elevator longer than necessary. Maybe she didn't even live in the building. At work, my thoughts weren't clear. For the first time in weeks, I couldn't concentrate. People spoke to me, but I couldn't follow their words. I looked at the ring on my finger. The red stone had become dull, almost gray. The mirror at home had started to cloud too, like it was fogged with breath. That evening, I came home and found the mirror cracked. It hadn't fallen. Nothing around it was broken. It was just a single line, right through the center, like someone had drawn a scar across my reflection. I tried not to panic. I picked up the mirror and turned it over, but there was nothing on the back. No message, no symbol. I ran my fingers across the glass, but it didn't cut me. Still, I felt something sharp inside. Not pain, exactly. more like fear waking up from sleep. Over the next few days, more cracks appeared, not just in the mirror, but in my daily life. My favorite coffee shop closed without notice. My bus route changed. A man I used to work with passed away, and nobody told me until I saw his name in a newspaper. Then my dreams began to shift. I saw the forest woman again, but this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a tall figure in gray. His face was hidden, but I could feel his presence. Heavy, watching. The woman didn't smile anymore. She simply turned her head away from me, and I woke up crying. On Friday, I received no box. It was the first day in weeks that nothing came. I should have felt relief, but instead, I felt empty, like I was being forgotten by something I didn't even understand. The silence lasted for 3 days. No gifts, no dreams, no strange feelings in the air. I tried to return to normal life, but it didn't work. People still avoided me. My voice sounded different, even to myself. I looked in the mirror and saw someone colder, harder, more distant. On the 4th day, I found a note on my window. Not inside, outside, stuck between the glass and the frame. It was wet from the rain and almost unreadable, but I could still make out the words. "Return what is not yours." I dropped the note. My heart began to race. Return what? The gifts? How? They weren't mine by choice. I didn't ask for them. That night, I gathered everything. The key, the ring, the comb, the mirror, the letter opener. I placed them all inside a bag and sat with it beside me, unsure what to do. I couldn't throw them away. I couldn't burn them. That didn't feel right. But I also couldn't keep them anymore. Then I remembered the forest, the dream, the woman. I had never been to a place like that, but something in me believed it was real, or at least real enough for this purpose. The next morning, I drove out of the city. I didn't know where I was going. I let the car move forward while my thoughts stayed quiet. I followed small roads, empty paths. Around noon, I saw a wooden sign pointing toward an old park I had never heard of. I turned in. The forest was quiet, not peaceful, just waiting. I parked the car and walked in with the bag held tightly in my hand. The deeper I went, the colder the air became. There were no birds, no sounds of water, only dry leaves under my feet. After walking for nearly an hour, I found a clearing, and there she was, the woman from my dreams. Sitting as before, hands folded in her lap. She didn't speak. She didn't smile, but her eyes met mine with something soft, something tired. I placed the bag at her feet and stepped back. She looked at it, then at me. I wanted to say something, ask something, but no words came. I felt like a child in front of her, full of questions I no longer knew how to form. She nodded once, and then I turned around and walked away. When I reached my car, my hands were shaking. The sun was lower in the sky. I looked back at the trees, but the path I had taken was already fading into shadow. That night, I slept without dreams for the first time in weeks. But in the morning, something else began. When I woke up the next morning, everything seemed quiet. But it wasn't an ordinary kind of quiet. It felt like the silence that follows a strong wind. Something heavy had passed through, and now the air was trying to remember how to breathe again. I lay in bed for a few minutes, afraid to move. The room looked the same. The clock ticked. Light came through the curtains. But something deep in me had shifted. I no longer felt watched. I made coffee, washed my face, and went to work. No strange looks from coworkers. No sudden cold air or whisper of wind in places it didn't belong. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself again. Still, I couldn't ignore the emptiness. The gifts had made life easier, but they had also changed how I moved through the world. Now, without them, everything felt more difficult, more real. I was slower at work. I forgot small things. I felt tired in the afternoon. But I also began to feel again. I laughed when someone told a joke. I cried during a sad film. These moments came like soft rain after a long, dry season. A week later, I received a message from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in months. She asked if I wanted to get coffee. I said yes before I could think twice. When we met, she looked surprised. "You seem different," she said. "Lighter, like something heavy is gone." I smiled. Maybe it is. We talked for hours about silly things, about life, about the past. And when we said goodbye, I realized I hadn't once checked my phone or thought about time. Later that evening, I found something unexpected in my apartment. A flower. Just one. It sat in a cup of water on the windowsill, facing the fading sun. I hadn't put it there. I stared at it for a long time. It was soft yellow, simple, and alive. I didn't feel fear this time, just a quiet kind of warmth. The way you feel when someone thinks of you without needing anything in return. I didn't touch it. I let it be. Over the next few weeks, I focused on rebuilding what I had let fade. I called my family. I cleaned out old drawers. I gave away things I didn't need. And slowly, I began to see life for what it was. Imperfect, unpredictable, but still mine. But even in this peace, questions remained. Who had sent the gifts? Why had they stopped? And what did they want from me? I tried not to think about it too much. But one evening, while walking home from the store, I saw something that made me stop. At the corner of the street stood a woman. Not the forest woman. Someone younger, wearing a long coat and holding a black umbrella. She stood perfectly still, looking straight ahead. I passed by her slowly, trying not to stare. But as I walked, I noticed something in her hand. It was a wooden box tied with gold ribbon. She didn't speak. She didn't move. But I felt her watching me, even after I turned the corner. When I got home, there was nothing on my doorstep. No box. No note. No sound. But the mirror on my table, the one I had returned, was back. It was no longer cracked. I sat down and stared at it. My own reflection looked back, steady and quiet. I waited for something to happen, but nothing did. I was afraid to touch it. Yet I couldn't look away. That night, the dream returned. I was standing in the same forest. The woman was there, but now she was closer. Her eyes were kind. She reached out her hand, and I took it. In her palm was a small silver stone, shaped like a tear. She placed it on my chest, and I felt a deep warmth spread through my body. Then she stepped back, and I woke up. In the morning, I checked my reflection. I looked the same, but I felt different. I no longer wanted answers. I no longer needed explanations. Whatever the gifts had been, test, curse, blessing, they were over, and what remained was mine to carry. But I had learned something important. The world will always offer shortcuts. There will always be moments when something easier, faster, or more perfect appears in front of you. But nothing comes without a cost. The gifts had helped me, yes, but they had also taken parts of me. Quiet parts I didn't notice until they were gone. Now I was whole again. Not perfect, not magical, but real. And that was enough. Months passed. I never saw the woman on the corner again. No more boxes arrived. The mirror stayed clean. The flower on the windowsill withered slowly, then turned to dust. Sometimes I missed the feeling of being chosen, the wonder of discovering something strange and powerful. But I also remembered how lonely it made me. I still wear the ring sometimes, not for its magic, but as a reminder of what I was, of what I could have become. Now, when I walk to work, I notice the sounds of the birds. I hear the wind in the trees. I feel the small weight of my own steps on the ground. And that is the only gift I need. I hope you have enjoyed the story. Like and comment if you want to hear more soon.